All right, we're back. We are COMP1073 in the winter 2017 semester at Georgian. It's week 11, part 2 of our broadcast. And we're still talking about jQuery validation in AJAX. We just finished talking about some regular expressions as well, right? So if I actually look at regular expressions we talked about. By the way, I've taken away the prevent default from last video. And the reason why I wanted to show you what you can do with both HTML and JavaScript or jQuery validation. So if I was to run this now the way it is, let me go back to my site. Here it is. And if I refresh and if I try and submit, it's going to say, hey, please fill out this field. This is the HTML side. Please fill out this field, right? If I fill out the field wrong and I press tab, it's going to say, hey, your full name is too short, right? If I press my name, that's fine now, Tom, and let's say I put in my full name. And then I put in my contact number, which is I'm not checking for right now. And if I go on my email address and put in a wrong email address, it says, hey, your email address is wrong, right? Okay, cool. If I put tom@example.com, and I go on, and I put some stuff in there, and I click send, it'll work, right? So it's another layer of protection. Email, the way HTML checks email, it checks for the @ sign, right? So example would be, I sit there and type my name, right? And my contact number, which is wrong, and my email address, which is Tom, right? And then if I go back here and type my email address again and press tab, it's okay, right? Because I'm avoiding it. If I press send, it's going to say, well, you need an @ sign. That's what HTML does. So HTML will prevent me, without using that prevent default, HTML will prevent me from moving on with a form. As long as I specify there's an email that's required, it will prevent me from moving on unless I do it. And then the jQuery, the JavaScript, the jQuery will also indicate that there's something wrong, which is good feedback to the user to let them know that they need to change something in order for them to move on, right? So example would be tom@example.com might be valid. It goes away, and then I can add my message in there, whatever it's going to be, right? Now we still have a problem with contact numbers. So let's find a regular expression for phone number. So regular expression for phone number. So 10-digit phone number. So that's what I want. I want a 10-digit phone number. Okay, cool. So this is a valid and validate format North American phone numbers. You can see that this is the North American phone. Here's my regular expression, right? There it is. Look. This looks like it's pretty good, right? Okay, let's copy it. So we'll grab this whole thing and we'll copy it, and then we'll go back into our little form here. And just like I have is valid email address, I'm going to do another one, another function here. I'm going to say is valid phone number, and I'm going to put the phone number in there, phone number, right? And I'm going to say my pattern is equal to / this, and with the /, right? And then I'm going to say return pattern.test, and then whatever my phone number is, right? So phone number, right? Same idea. Now look at this regular expression. It says, hey, it's optional, but I need this first part, right? I need this first part. This first part is optional, right? That's what it says. First part's optional. This part's optional, right? The dot, dash, or some other big dot, right? I need to have one of these things optional, right? Remember, this is why making regular expressions work may not work for you the way you think they work, right? Let's check this out and see do you see a problem with this? It says I need at least 3 characters, 3 of these, 0 to 9s. That's what I need, right? And at least 3 of these, 0 to 9, and at least 4 of those 0 to 9s at the end. So 3, 3, 4, which is really 10 digits, right? Makes sense? However, you have all these question marks. That means optionals. Let's see what that means, right, actually. So they actually show you some examples in C# and some examples in JavaScript, which we just did, right? And let's try this out by ourselves. So we're going to go in here, and we're going to say our name and our contact number. Oh, man, what happened? Well, I don't have my code in here for the contact number, right? Oh, boy, here we go. Here's my full name. Here's my email address change. Well, let's do the same thing with contact number, right? So we're going to say, remember, we're using contact number as a name. So we'll say contact number dot change, and then function. Wow, I'm doing the same thing over and over again, yeah? You can almost create a little function that can sub in here because it's the same pattern, right? I want you to notice this. So this is all this stuff, right? Where the change is a function that ends here. And I want to grab all this stuff here, sure, too, as well, and put it in there. And instead of email error message, we're going to say contact number, error message. We don't have that yet, but we will. And then instead of email, we're going to change to contact. Well, a lot of duplication, right? Invalid contact number, or phone number, we'll say phone number. Maybe you also want to say, please enter in the form of, 416, right? Show, right? And instead of email.validation, we want to contact number dot val. I want to do that. And same idea, exactly the same code, which means it's begging me for a method. It's begging me to put a method in place, right? To do this validation, right? But instead of valid email address, this is where the change goes in, is valid phone number, right? It's the one I want to use, where I pass in the phone number. Different method, right, that I'm accessing. That's one difference. And now inside of my contact.html, I'm going to do the same thing, right? I'm going to take this part here, copy it, and I'm going to put in, some information in there, paste it. Instead of full name email, error message is going to be called the contact number error message. There we go. Hey, just to make it fancy, right? I want to redo the code for this to make it even better, where I add a class of this hidden message, right? Let's add it in. I want to add a class in here. Bootstrap class of, right? So again, you want to kind of put in a kind of alert, right? And I'm going to put this class in a second for Bootstrap. So if you want to look at alerts in Bootstrap, just to give you some ideas. So if I go get Bootstrap, if I do it, so I can show you. And if I go to components, I think it might be under CSS actually. Here's alerts. I want to make this really nice alert, which is looks a lot nicer, right, than if I put in a red message, right? So how do I do that? It's class alert, success, info, warning, or danger. Danger is the one we want to use, right? And I want to use this alert. Now, wouldn't it be nice if this alert was the exact same alert that we use for all of our messages, right? But it comes up at the top, right? So whatever the alert, the last problem was, right? We could do that. If I put this underneath, it's going to really mess around with our layout. It's going to make our layout go up and down, right? Just putting it out there. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So class alert, and then alert dash whatever the color you want. So alert, and alert dash the color, which is danger. I take this stuff here, which modify this class on the CSS side, just to make it nicer. That's all I'm doing it, right? So I'm not doing it for, you don't need to do this. I'm doing it because I want to do this. I want to make it look nicer. All right. And let's see, when we did this, if we do this, and we really don't need to use our color, right? Because we're already doing the color. So I'm going to go back to my contact, my app.js inside here. And notice where we do the color change. Forget it. Don't do this anymore. Because then we're going to let Bootstrap take care of our CSS for us, which is the right thing to do. Right? Because we've been using Bootstrap the whole time. You might as well take advantage of the Bootstrap stuff, right? Cool. All right, let's see if it works now. And how it works. Does it work? Going back to here, and we're going to try this out. We're going to say T, bam, full name too short, right? So I kind of go in there and go Tom, right, goes away, contact number, 416, bam, invalid phone number, 415, right? Let's see if I can put in 416 space, 555 space 5555. Is that okay? And the answer is no, because in our equation, you need to have a dash or a dot, right? But maybe, they don't know. What if I just don't put anything in there? 416 555, 5555. Is that acceptable? And the answer is yes, right? 416, 555, or 666. No, right? 416 dash, right? 555 dash 5555. Yes, right? So you see that works, right? Email address, Tom, no, right? Tom at example. No, Tom at example.com. Yes. Now we've got some pretty good, simple validation we can go on the form. And you can go further than this. I'm stretching the surface with you guys. But think about validating things like anything you need to calculate. From calculating something, some kind of number, calculate an amount. You want to check to see if the amount, the value you're getting is a numeric value, right? You can check that with regular expressions, right? There's many other easier ways to do it too, but I'm just showing you this is one way of validation. Now that I've got everything, I can send my message off, and it needs the final check is, what if I leave my your message field blank? I made it required, so I need to add in some kind of message. And now I'm ready to send. Yeah? That's the full gamut of regular expressions. Let's go back to this. I'll put this up on GitHub. Actually, so I'll put it in there. I'll say added regex for phone number. Push. Regular expressions. All right, now this is my favorite section, right? And we have another hour to cover this, which is kind of cool. It's not going to take long. We've got a few slides left, about 10 slides left. Let me talk about why I like to use jQuery for AJAX. Remember what we did with regular HTML, right? With HTML, if you look at what we did for AJAX, we had to do all this. Here's all these steps. Step 1, need an XHR object. Step 2, open a file. Step 3, step 4, step 5, step 6. Keep on doing all these steps. Woo! Look at step 5, and there's a bunch of other ones, right? Whew! That's a crazy amount of steps. What if we could do all this much simpler? And we can't. Let's take a look at some stuff that we can do with jQuery. So again, we can use jQuery to get HTML, XML, JSON data, and instead of doing all that work, we can use the $.get and the $.post, which do get and post type of requests with AJAX. We can also do a $.each, which for each object we get back from AJAX, do something, right? Nice and easy. Let's look at some examples. So here's something. Here's our load method, right? Load HTML data. All right. Load JSON data, right? $.get JSON. Here's my URL. And what to do on success, right? That's it, my friends. One line instead of 6, right? That's why I like jQuery way more, right? Because it's simplified and we really don't care about managing the object, right? Now, what do you get back? That's a different situation, right? Here's my data that I get back. So data is a map or a string as a sent to the server, right? Success is the function that we're going to use. We're going to put in an optional function. Data type, we can specify the type that we get back, which are whether it's HTML, XML, JSON, and so on, back from the data. Whatever we want. Here, we're going to specify this is the best option for us because we're using JSON, right, to get JSON. The for each method, for each object in the collection, right, do something. This is it's a key because we're going to get multiple objects back from JSON. Okay, some more stuff. Here's some examples for code, right? I'm targeting this object with an ID of solution. I'm going to load whatever my HTML content I want, right? Or I'm going to do a get request from my get manager PHP. Here's the manager. I'm going to send in a name is equal to Agnes, and then I'm going to do my show manager function, which is going to show the manager where that matches my name as Agnes. That's my data, right? Here's what we want though. Get JSON, team.json, and then pass in the data that we get back from the team. Here's a more protracted example. So we're going to load methods to load HTML, where we say on document ready, we're going to load this from HTML. We're going to get a part of the HTML that's in there and return it inside of our, we're going to load this object, right? And we're going to, once we've got it, right, once we load the HTML, we inject it pretty much where we load it. Let's keep going down and see some other examples, and then I'll show you. So now I just want to get you to get the gist of how it goes, right? So an example of this would be, here's my content, right? And notice I have my vProspect, vConvert, vRetain, right? And what I'm targeting in the previous slide is those IDs, right? So I'm getting this data and I'm injecting it inside of this area, right? Inside my vProspect. When I click on vProspect, vConvert, and vRetain, I'm going to load the data inside there. And I'm going to load the data in something called solution right here. All right, so my solution div is empty. When I click on one of those buttons, bam, it's going to load it in with whatever I tell it, right? And that's way simpler than AJAX, blah, blah, by the time I'm ready, come back, everything's good. The big dance we do with AJAX, right? Let's keep looking at other options. Okay, so we're going to actually, I'm going to zoom out here a little bit so you can see more. So we're going to load XML, and we usually use the get and post. I'm not going to read this part, but basically it takes care of the XHR request. And more or less what you got here is when you use the $.get, you're going to use team.text. You're going to pass in the data, and then you're going to parse the data, right, with xml.find. You're going to parse the data because it's XML and return the details. Normally, we don't have to do this. This is kind of like a loader, a custom loader that we're building to read XML. And here we're using the for each loop. So data.find, we're looking for management, right? And we're looking for every child, for each child inside this data, I want a loop. I want to loop through each of them. And for each one of them, I want you to load up or find and append to this ID of team. I want you to append an H3 element with this information. That's what it's doing. So it's going to populate the names of the managers, right? That's the XML example. And here's JSON, and this is what we really want. So here's an example, a piece of code snippet that we can use to get data from our JSON object. Okay, let's check this out. Document.ready. Remember, document.ready is just like that, an IFI. That's what it's like. This is just a closure, document.ready. Now, get JSON. We're looking at the team at this particular file, team.json. We're passing in data for each data element. Run this function, and for each object in the data with key value pairs, right? Append to the team ID each of the objects that we're adding in, each of the name, the title, and the bio. We're going to add that in using JSON. Okay, so if we know that this is all we need, get JSON, right? And we can do a for each loop with .each, right? Oh my God, we get so much power with 2 lines of code, right? So what do I mean by that? Let us do our main nav, and we can load. Remember, our main nav is just HTML, right? It's just HTML. So we're going to use the HTML loader for this, right? Where I'm targeting main nav. I'm targeting main nav, right? That's it. And I want to load navbar HTML in there, right? That's what I'm doing. I don't have to do onReady state change, right? I don't have to do the load method, the onload event. This whole method becomes much easier, right? Let's see. Let's see how much easier it becomes. Okay. In fact, just to make it really super easy, just to show you what it does, I'm going to comment out everything. So I'm going to go one of these, and we're going to go all the way down to down here, right? And we have to be very careful because I don't want to comment everything out. I just want to comment out everything except the last curly brace. Okay, cool. So this is that's what it was like. Well, how does it look like now? Right? We want to use the load event, right? So we're going to say something like this. Hey, jQuery, right? var main nav, right? Is equal to a jQuery object with an ID of main nav, right? Oops. ID of main nav, right? There it is. Hey, that's the idea of main nav. Great, fantastic. That's what I'm targeting. Okay, cool. For this main nav, load, right? Load, and this is my data that I want to load from a file, which is this file right here, right, comma. Right, here it is. Here's my file that I'm loading. And then when I'm done loading, right, I want to pass in my data from my file. So I'm running it all on one line here for you guys to see this. Okay, here's my data from my file. So all in one line, I've said this. Hey, in fact, do I really need the main nav anymore? It's almost like I don't, right? The only time I really needed it was for down here, inner HTML. I don't call it any other place, right? This is weird. It says a round bracket is expected because I haven't completed what I'm doing somewhere, right? Or maybe I don't have enough braces. That's why I'm getting this error, right? Because all this is commented out. And let's check this out. So function, right? Oh yeah, maybe I have. Is my load navbar? Yeah, that's what I really wanted, right? So load navbar is what I really want. So grab this one. I actually commented out the wrong thing, so cut it, put it out here, paste it, and when I load navbar, I want to put all this inside. Sorry. Right, so my load navbar, I'm trying to do this. See if there's an error anymore. Where? All right, so there's my load navbar, right? And in my load navbar, this is the function that's getting called. I can do this certainly, but do I really need to assign a main nav object anymore, right? Because I'm using main nav down here to check the inner HTML properties, and I don't have to do any of this stuff. The switching, this part here, the switching of the title, this is important, right? I'm going to grab this stuff and put it back in a second. But what I really want to do is just be able to display my main nav, right? So I'm taking it and importing it into my main nav object, right? And I'm getting the data, and for every piece of data that I can do something with. But what if I don't want to care about the data? I don't want to do anything with it. I just want to slap it in, right? Well, first of all, what does this do? If I just do this, does it do anything? Right? So go back, and if I go back to my page here and refresh, I'm getting my navbar. Well, guess what I'm not getting? I'm not getting my links anymore, right? I'm not getting my links because, right, these links were generated by an effect. So look, within one line, I just want to show you this, right? This one line, this right here, right, does everything for me. I'm sorry, guys, but I think that's pretty sexy, right? Just saying, right? So that's the first thing. So once the data has been loaded, this is what happens. Inside this area here is where I want to do this, right? The switching stuff, right? I don't care about inner HTML anymore. I don't care about any of this, but this part up to here, I do care about. I'm going to copy this, and I bring it into this. And now, my friends, we should have the same switching capability we had before, but in a nice little code block like this, which is much nicer. Yeah? Or is it no? What do you think? Alex, what's your opinion? Do you understand what I did? How about that? Yeah. So all I'm using is one line. I'm targeting my main nav. I don't need a variable to target it. I'm saying, hey, as soon as the page loads, as soon as I call my load navbar, load my navbar. Take my target that main nav ID, anything that has a main nav ID, and when I use the load method, it injects data into that main nav ID, the place where the container that has an ID of main nav, right? In this particular case, it's a div container, right? And now if I go back, I'm getting that switching again, right? So I can do this, I can switch between the two, and I'm getting that dark area that denotes that this is the active page, because I'm setting my active class of active to any one of these objects that I'm clicking on, right? My main nav is working with a lot less code. Okay. Again, the power of jQuery with AJAX. So let's get rid of all this now. Just to show you how much we got rid of, we got rid of all this. It's about, I would say, 20 lines or so, maybe more, 30, 40 lines. That's a lot of lines to get rid of, right? That's tons and tons of lines to get rid of, right? Compared to what it was running like before. That's our code now. I'm going to put that up. All right, so I'm going to put that up on GitHub so you can compare mine with yours. I'm going to say migrated to jQuery to load Navbar, right? Blah, 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 da, 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 and push. That's cool. That loads HTML. But we want to load JSON data for our files, right? I put it up on GitHub if you didn't follow along, by the way. So this is where we are actually loading our game information, right? Here's right here. Now I had all this other information. We were building on this idea of a number and numbers and dates and all this kind of stuff. I did the date class. Remember we kind of reviewed the date class and everything else. I'm going to keep that in there because when it comes to the time we're going to do our final exam, I want you to remember some of the stuff we talked about, right? We talked about object-oriented programming. So I'm keeping it in there for that reason, not because I need it, right? So when I review this stuff with you, I go over what we did and how we did it, right? Okay. Here's our XHR object, right? I want to do a get games.json. That's true, right? When I'm ready, I want to parse json.parse this data. Okay. I want to JSON parse the data with this response text. This is going to be different, guys and girls, right? Totally different. Because I want to parse it as JSON, right? I may not have to do that anymore because it is JSON. And so we're going to comment it out. So inside here, anywhere after this line 90 on my thing here, inside of the round load where it says load home page, right? So around line 90, just underneath where we declare games as a type of a game, right? By the way, this is all unnecessary, right? We're going to just comment this stuff out all the way down to about here. It's all this stuff. All right, let's try this out. So I'm going to do the same thing. So going back to our PowerPoint, look what it says, .get JSON. Now, this is different. This is not using the load function. We're using a function to get the data. Once I have the data, for each item of my data, I can do something. Okay. So I want to say .get JSON. And then in brackets, the URL or string, we're going to get that from down here, right, which is games.json. Okay, and then some kind of callback function on success, right? This is my callback function. This is where it's going to happen. And on success, I want to read this data object. Notice I'm passing in on success, right? I've done this. I want to pass in my data object. I want to be able to read my data object. There it is. Let's print out my data object for now before we start redoing my stuff. Console log. Let's look at the data object for this one and see what we're going to get. Here's the data, right, that I'm getting here. Let's see what we're getting with our data. All right, we're going to go back to here. We're going to go back to home, and we're not going to get a list anymore. But we're definitely going to get a console log. So I'm going to inspect, look at the console, and see what I get here. Look, I get an object, right? Inside my object, I get a games array. Inside my games, I get a bunch of this. So it's an object, and inside the object is a games array. So actually what I'm getting back is, the data that I'm getting back is an object. An object that contains a games array. All right, that's what I'm getting back for our particular object. Okay, cool. Do I have to parse? No, I don't have to parse anymore. I don't have to do that parsing. I already got an object. If I get an object back, this is JSON, right? Now I got to go back to this piece. What did we do before? Well, we parsed it. We don't have to do that anymore. Up here, we parsed it. Here's our part. We open a JSON file, and down in here we parsed. This is what we did last time. We don't have to do this anymore. It's parsed for us. So that part is all done. This piece is, it waits for it to load. And when we're loading, we want to target our games list body, right? So this part we need. So we're going to grab this part and go into here. So that part we need. Okay, so this part we need. This we're targeting the game list body. That we need. We can't do anything without that. We still need to target that. Cool. Okay, so we've targeted the game list body. That's good. Now we're doing a for each. For each function game, right? I don't know if I could do that, right? For each game, but I'm not getting a game. Each game in data.games, right? I'm not quite getting that, right? Why is that? Because data is what we're searching through, right? Data. For each object in data, repeat, right? That's what we're doing. Remember how we can do it for each object? We can do it like this, right? For each piece of data, right? Do something. Repeat, right? Okay, let's try this out. Let's just print out the data, whatever the data is. For each object, print out the object. So that's what this is doing, right? So we use the dot each. All right, so for each, look what it says. For each object, it says, here's the collection. Now, I'm curious, right? I'm curious. You know, I know what I'm getting, right? For each data object, right? For each data object. Am I getting anything with JSON? I'm getting an object, right? So I can't do for each data. For each data, I can't do this. If I go this, right? For each data, do something. For each piece of data, do something. Here's my anonymous function to do something, right? If I try and show the data that I'm getting, and this is the function that I'm getting, if I try and show something, so okay, console.log data. I don't know, like how do I get that data now, right? This isn't a collection, this is an object. Do I get the object back 10 times? Let's see. So refresh, and I get an object, and I get a games array, and I get it a bunch of times. I get it once, right? My games array. So that didn't really solve it. And that's why we do that nested. That's why we do that nested data, that nested for each, right? So how we do this double for each thing, one is the function, and then inside there, we're looking for key value pairs, right? Well, it's not really key value pairs we're looking for. We're looking for games, right? Now I know that I have a games array inside of my object, right? Remember, we're building a custom loader, people, right? We know the data we're getting, okay? I'm not guessing. So it's not going to load just anything. So I could do data.game, right? That's what I could load. That's the collection, right? Or is it games? Let's take a look at that games.json object. Games.json shows us games is an array, right? Array is a collection. So for each array, right, data.games, I want to show, right, each game, I want to show, you know, the object. I want to show different objects. Like, for example, and if I look back here, notice that I have a value, right, whatever the value is. I get keys and values, right, where the value is the object that I'm getting back, right? Value.name, value.title, value.bio. So I'm going to call it game instead of value. That doesn't make any sense to me. So I'm going to go something like, sorry, go to here and put in there game and console.log game dot, right? Now this actually installs the game in that new row like this. I'm not going to do that yet. All I want to see right now is the game dot name, right? The name of the game. Let's see if that worked, right? So undefined. All right, so game is undefined, right? Remember, we're working with an object, right? We're working with an object, and we're trying to define what it is. Now, what if I use the same code that I had before? That's another option. Or if I nested it the way they told me to, right? Like key and value pairs, key value, right? Well, how do I do that, right? So again, if I said something like, if I nested it within another for each, this is what they suggest. Each data function. Okay. Notice that this is what they're telling you to do, right? Here's the data function, and put the other for each loop inside that one, just to follow the pattern, right? Because this is the object. That's what they're telling you. Here's the collection. You're going to target the collection, right? And the collection is not data.games, but rather key value, right? So game and then value, right? Notice the way it works is, well, actually it's key and name. We'll say key and game, where the game.name is being printed. If we went with their suggestion, that's exactly the same thing. I'm choosing key and value, where my name, title, and bio is the value dot, which will be the game dot. Okay, let's check this out and see if it works. Complicated. And this is where sometimes we use jQuery for where it makes sense, right? Here we go. Undefined. If I refresh, undefined, right? app.js console log right here, game.name, right? Key and value. So nice try. We tried to use something that we saw, right? But we already have a solution here. We have this for each stuff happening. We know it's an object, and we know the object itself is JSON data, right? Just like we parsed the object over here. Here we parsed the object as data. This came in as JSON data, right? And then what we did was we created a list, game list, and we said for every object inside the data, do this, which is much better. It's a much better, neater little function. So I'm going to copy this piece here. Oops. I'm going to go back up to where we had this piece, right? All this each stuff, right? Again, we want to use this stuff where it makes sense, right? So I'm going to kind of paste this in there, data.games for each, because data itself is the data that's coming in, the object, right? Data.games for each game in games loop and create the rows, the rows inside of our data. And now we have it again, right? Because we're custom loading. We know what we're loading from we created this, right? We loaded our data by saying we made a for each loop, and games is the actual collection that we're iterating through. Okay, so this is the solution. But we want to use jQuery to do this, as opposed to JavaScript. This is JavaScript, right? And I'm just going to get rid of all this. We don't need this anymore. Oops. Hate that. My selection tool is way too fast. All right, so let's just do it by scroll wheel. Scroll wheel, get rid of all this. Still cut down a lot of code, right? Take a look. That's it. Much simpler than all the XHR requests and everything else. But we want to even cut this down further. Is there a way? And you might see that there might not be savings at this point. Because look, what are we doing to replace it? We're going to replace one line. That's it, really, at the end of the day. Append would be, instead of append child, game list instead of doing this. I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's almost exactly the same. We're not really saving much anymore. So when we don't save anything, we don't use jQuery, right? So what do we do here? Up on GitHub, we're going to say something like migrated to jQuery to load games.json. And push. So what are the steps? Let's talk about these steps now, because there's only one step. right? One step. Get JSON, the name of the file, and a function that passes in the data object. And then we parse it as normal. Okay, that's what we're doing here. That's one step. Step one. And what do we do for loading our Navbar when we load HTML, right? What are we doing? One step. We do whatever we're loading into, load whatever we're the file that we're loading, and then pass in the data. Done. It's one step. There is no. It's one line, right? One line of code that takes care of 30 lines of code, right? I'm sorry, my friends, but when I have a thing like this happening, right? When I have code savings, right? I always think about, now what's on the back end? Am I really saving anything from a jQuery perspective? How do I know? Well, here's what you can do with VS Code sometimes. If I right click and I go to definition, right? By the way, you can do this Visual Studio itself as well. It should take me to the index.d.ts, the jQuery itself. And what it does is it defines this load method, right? Here's my load method, right? Right here. That's all it does inside this load string, my load method. That's what it does. It tells you what it takes. This is where I'm getting my code completion from, right? In my index.d.ts, that's actually sitting inside of my node modules right here. That's what this is, right? What about if I want to look at the jQuery? I want to identify the jQuery before we end for the day, right? I want to kind of look at the jQuery. So I'm going to go into scripts, and I want to go into lib, and I want to go into jQuery, and I want to go into distribution, the dist part, and I want to go, instead of the minified file, which looks like this, I want to go into the JS file, which looks like this, right? And I want to find that load method, right? So I'm going to kind of do a search and do load, right? We have 24 different things that have load in it, right? So let's see if we can find the right one. Loading, unload handler, load completed, load listener, load. Load, callback XHR onload. What does this look like to you? AJAX on the other side, right? This is a callback function, right? We're 19 out of 24. If we don't find it soon, we're going to be in trouble, right? Onload, callback. All right, so we get the unload part happening. Load error, load. Okay, here we go. Here's the load function. Load, so jQuery function load is equal to an anonymous function that takes the URL, parameters, and a callback function. That's what it does. This is the original jQuery, the actual code, open source, so you can see it, right? We've cracked open the shell of what's inside jQuery for just 1 second, okay? I don't expect you to know this, by the way. I just want you to see it so you understand where it comes from, all right? All right, so when we're looking inside of here, we have a few variables that we declare, selector, type, and response. And inside there, what we're doing is it says stripping and collapsing. We have another method that they're going to, stripping and collapse method, all right, which takes a value, right? And then what we want to try and see is where is that XHR object? Here we go, jQuery.ajax. Okay, this is something we're calling another method, jQuery.ajax, where we're passing in the URL. The type is get, the data type is HTML, and here's the response arguments. There's my response text. Look, we're doing all the work we normally would do, and we're returning this object, whatever that object is. So I'm sorry, are we saving anything? Really, are we saving anything with using jQuery? Think about it. I'm taking the jQuery function, this function that's embedded in jQuery, it's invisible to us because we're using one line, and we're thinking, hey, this is really cool, right? We're using one line of code. I'm slick. I can use one line of code to do all the work what I did with JavaScript by myself. The answer is you don't save a darn thing. In fact, if anything, I'm doing almost the exact same stuff. Now this is optimized, so they've done some optimizations. We didn't do some optimizations in our code, right? But if you actually look at what they've done here, they've almost done the exact same steps as we have, right? And we know this because they're also calling something called .ajax, right? And if I go to definition for .ajax, right, there is no definition. Let's just see if I can find AJAX here. So if I type anything that has .ajax, right? Okay, so there's 52 out of 59 calls for AJAX, right? And if we go back, here's jQuery each. Let's see if we can see that, right? That AJAX call, AJAX extend. Not only are we doing that whole thing, but we're also calling another method within this method called AJAX. And here's the function. Here it is right here. Here's my function. So here's my AJAX function, right? Where I have my URL and options. And now I'm going to go through this bunch of other stuff where I have response headers and timeouts and anchors and a bunch of other stuff where I set up my AJAX setup. I have to call, let's see what function this goes to. Let's see where this is, AJAX setup. So I'm going to go look at that, AJAX setup. I want you to really see, where this is all happening, right? So you just don't see that. You think it's not, it's pretty easy, but actually, here's AJAX setup. I'm passing AJAX setup. Where's my function AJAX setup? No. Here it is. Here's AJAX setup. I do all this work, right? And then I'm also calling AJAX extend. Hello, am I saving anything? In the scheme of things, I'm not. What am I gaining by using AJAX and jQuery? Simplicity. So for you as a developer, especially if you're a web person and not a developer, then, jQuery is a really good solution. Okay. Also, they've kind of really thought about it really a lot. This version of jQuery has been ongoing for many, many, many years, which means chances are they're not going to do something wrong here. It's going to work, most likely, right? You can depend that jQuery is probably going to do what you want it to do, right? That's the advantages. Disadvantage, you're not saving anything. You're actually making it worse. My jQuery, my code is going to be maybe double, triple what I had before when I use this in reality, right? What I'm gaining is simplicity. What I'm gaining is peace of mind. What I'm gaining is I know how to load a file. It's very easy for me, but it's very high level. It's not vanilla JavaScript, which means I'm loading something else. Questions around this? Does anyone not understand that, what I just said? Because remember, whenever we use a library, whatever that library is, it's doing work for us. And if it's doing work for us, that means that it's adding code, not subtracting code, every time. And this is where we get into the argument. I'm just going to say this for this little rant. Give me a few minutes to talk about this with you guys, just from a lecturing perspective. Okay, I'm sorry, I don't like lecturing, quote unquote, necessarily, but I want to do a concept with you for a second. Think about what the programming languages use today. Let's think about Java. Is Java really efficient as a programming language? The answer is it's pretty high level. As a programming language, it has a lot of stuff that's built into it. What does that mean? When you hear Java, a lot of stuff that's built into it means I have a lot of libraries that someone's already pre-written for me that I can access, which means that there's something lower level that I can get to. JavaScript is a high-level language, which means it has a lot of other functions that are pre-written that add functionality, but make the language fatter, right? It's a fat language. It's not a thin language. A thinner language would be what? Any ideas? Assembly. That's a really thin language, right? Assembly is like the thinnest language, right? What's one step up maybe from assembly? C. What's one step up from C? C++. What's one step up or two steps up from, maybe a lot of steps up from C++? Is C# and Java probably on the same level? I don't know. One time I might think Java is higher. Sometimes I think C# is higher. I'm pretty sure C# is even higher level, Microsoft's version, than Java. Java and C# are like same version of each other in some ways, right? But I think Java is a little lower level than Microsoft's high level C#. Okay, where does JavaScript sit in all this? The highest level. It's really way up there because there's a lot of abstraction to get there. It's not low level like JavaScript, like a C#, right? Lower level like C#, because C# is a compiled language, right? At the end of the day, what you get out of C# is quite low level, right? It's pretty good, clean. JavaScript, though, is way up there. There's no compilation. It's interpretation. You get an interpreter. It goes through lines of code and does all these commands based on basic JavaScript code, right? So boiling it down, the higher level you go, the easier it is for you to use. Chances are it's less efficient. It's like fat and sugar. It tastes good, but it's bad for you, okay? I don't know if there's a better analogy for this than this one, right? We love to eat fat and sugar and meat. It's not great for you, but it tastes great, right? Just like jQuery, right? It's easy to use, but maybe it's not good for you, right? And I mean that only because you can do almost the same thing you can do with jQuery with something called Query Selector All. Let me look at this before we end. So if I look at Query Selector All, and I'm going to search for that here, Query Selector All. Query Selector All. Query Selector All is exactly what jQuery does. When I look at a jQuery, pretty much, to some degree, Query Selector All sends back an element list matching the query that you put in there, the selectors. That's exactly what it does. It returns a node list of elements, right? That's what it is, and it's JavaScript. Once I use jQuery, once I use a $, right? It's packed with stuff. It's packed with sugar, right? It's packed with fat, right? It tastes good, but it's not good for you, right? To make it easier, when we access websites and everything else, use jQuery if it makes it easy for you. But remember in your mind, it's less efficient than using JavaScript, vanilla JavaScript. Vanilla JavaScript doesn't taste so good, the vanilla that I'm talking about, right? It's not like ice cream vanilla, all right? It's like lowest level vanilla, the plain, basic, default language, JavaScript, right? It doesn't taste so good, but it's good for you, right? And that's why we learn JavaScript. That's why you're in this course. Otherwise, if you want to do some high-level functions, and I'm sure you've done this before you've come to this course, you want to do some kind of, gallery, where you want to do an image gallery, you look it up. jQuery. Oh, this is jQuery image loop, some kind of carousel, jQuery carousel you want to use. Nice and easy. You copy the code, you slap it into your HTML, and away you go. You have a beautiful little effect. Tastes good, but it's not good for you, right? Further than that, let's abstract up the chain. Let's make it even worse, right? Remember that when we use jQuery, right, there's all these other extra libraries. Actually, I have it open already. There's all these extra libraries already. Here's the library that we have in jQuery we can use, right? jQuery UI. jQuery UI has additional things here. For example, tooltips and different kinds of buttons and check radios and date pickers and dialogues and menus and progress bars and a bunch of other stuff that are already pre-written for you. Fantastic, you might say. It's amazing. Yes, it tastes good, but it's not good for you, right? That's the way you have to look at it. When you have these extra things, this is on not only jQuery, but add more stuff to jQuery to give you this, right? Hey, what about Bootstrap? Oh, it makes you look like a superhero, right? You don't know anything about CSS, right? But you add Bootstrap to your code, all of a sudden, now you have super heroic websites. They look amazing, right? Because Bootstrap is doing it all for you. And guess what Bootstrap is based on? jQuery. You can't do Bootstrap without jQuery. That means everything we just did, all the jQuery, plus Bootstrap on top of that, right, to make everything go. Remember, we've been using jQuery from the very beginning. From the first day, we use jQuery. It's just in the background, right? Cool? I know I hate to burst your bubble. I know you guys we're all loving the jQuery, right? And then I came and broke it for you. I said it's bad for you. It kind of is, but let's face it, right? Sometimes you want a chocolate, right? So I'll leave you with that one. All right, guys, thank you so much. We'll see you next week. Next week, you get assignment number 4, 3, right? And that 4, I think it's 4, right? And we're going to use Create.js. If you want to take a look at this ahead of time to read ahead, we're going to use Create.js to create a banner ad, an animated banner ad for our assignment. That's what we're going to be doing with pure graphics. So for people who are learning about graphics, we're going to use graphics here on the course too. We're going to animate something on the screen with pure JavaScript. Well, we'll use TypeScript to make it a little easier, right? Because we like chocolates. Thank you so much, guys. Take care. See you next week.